So it is my pleasure to introduce to you my friend, our fellow mom here at HFK. She's also a published children's book author, and she's going to be sharing her parents' love story. And she also has a book coming out, which she will share with us later. So everyone, please welcome Mayume Carelli.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. I'm looking out across this room and I see so many beautiful women. Some I know, some I don't, and I am really thankful that Erica and Lucy and Tammy allowed me this opportunity to share my story in such a safe and supportive and positive environment here. I'm really thankful. So I wanted to start off. First of all, most of you do know me, but for those of you who don't, my first name is pronounced Mayume. It's a Vietnamese name that my mother gave me in Vietnam, and it actually means beautiful. And growing up, of course, is a little tricky. Mayume, can you repeat that for me? And how do you spell that? So I've been called all kinds of things. I've been called Mayume, Mayume, Mayome. My personal favorite is Me Yummy. But in Vietnamese, it's actually Mayume. The spelling is very different. If you were to see it spelled, it's actually capital M-Y, capital D-U-N-G. We all know in English what that is. Exactly. So my father said, there's no way my daughter is going to go through life being called my daughter. No. So he had my name legally spelling changed so that it would read Mayume, M-A-Y-U-M-E, so hoping that people would phonetically say Mayume. Didn't really work. I still get all kinds of stuff. My mother said, how come I give my daughter the most beautiful name? I come to America, I mean cow poop. But she didn't say poop. And by the way, my brothers are named Michael and Stephen. So, before I get started, I have a lot to share, which is why I decided to write this story. It's a story that my father actually wanted to share and write, but he wasn't able to. So I'm kind of doing it for him, having him channel through me so that I can tell his story. The name of my book is called The Soldier and His Crazy Asian Lady. It did take a while to come up with the title, but it was the right one as soon as I knew it. And if you read the book, you'll understand why, because there is a lot of crazy in there. And the book will be available, hopefully by the end of spring. It'll be an ebook that you can purchase on Amazon. So, the year is 1970, and a young man walks into the U.S. Air Force recruitment office for his second time. He passes the chattering secretaries and the loud sound of the typewriters. He said the room is full of energy. He gets in line with the rest of the young men who are there waiting for their orders. And as he approaches the desk where the officers are there waiting for his papers, he steps up, hands him the papers, and the officer, without even looking up, takes them, gives it a big old stamp, and hands it back to him. The young man looks at the papers and he says, wait, hold on a second. This is Hanoi. You need to send me to Saigon. And the officer said, no, we don't. That's your orders. You're going to Hanoi. And he had a real attitude. And the young man started to get a little frustrated. He said, look, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. You have to send me to Saigon. So they start to argue. And the young man starts to get a little heated. He starts to turn red. His hands are sweating. He's not quite sure what he's going to do. And he gets right into the officer's face and he says, listen, you don't understand. You have to send me to Saigon. This is not a choice here. And he reaches into his back pocket. And he pulls out his wallet and he throws 3 photos on the table. And he says, do you see this? This is my life we're talking about. I have a family. I have a wife and a child, and they're waiting for me. And if you don't send me to Saigon, I will never see them again. They continue to argue, and finally, the colonel steps from behind the curtain. He says, what's going on here, Sergeant? What's all the ruckus? And the young man, before even waiting, starts to lay into him and says, look, this SOB is trying to send me to Hanoi, and I am telling you right now, "You are sending me to Saigon." And before he knew it, the room was silent. And the colonel looked at the young man, and he looked at the pictures on the table, and he looked at the officer, and he said, "You send this man to Saigon." And that was it. And the young man was a little flustered and taken back. "Well, okay then." Right, he scoops up his pictures, he turns, grabs his papers, and he goes to walk out. The whole room was silent. He gets outside the building, he steps out, and a bunch of young men had formed a circle, and they started talking for him. And he wiped a tear, and he said, "Well, what was I supposed to do? This is my life we're talking about." Well, that young man was, as you realize, was my father. His name was Dan Varnell. And those 3 photos he had in his pocket that day are the 3 photos you see on your table today. That was one of my favorite stories my father used to share that with us over and over again. We loved to hear it, and he loved to tell. Of course, he had a bunch of different words that I can't share. So, who were my parents? My father, his name was Dan Varnell. He was the youngest of 5 children. He grew up in Snohomish, Washington. They were dirt poor, and an alcoholic father. And they struggled a little bit. They used to battle over a loaf of bread and a pack of hot dogs. As he got older, he was the only one out of his family who did actually make it to college, while everyone else did not. And he was an avid hunter and fisherman, and he owned his landscaping business for quite a while growing up, but it didn't pay the bills, so he did finally end up going to work for Boeing in Everett. My mom, her name is Mayume V, and she was born in a small village outside of Binh Hoa in Vietnam. She was the only daughter of 3, and her mother died giving birth to her younger brother when she was only 6 years old. She had an older brother who was 13 at the time, and it kind of threw a whirlwind through their family. After her mom passed, her father developed pneumonia, and back then in a small village there was no help for that. And he soon died a couple months after that. So these 2 children were then orphaned. Rumor has it, though, that he really died of a broken heart, and we believe that that was the true story. So when they died, my mother had an auntie who took the older boy, because he could work in the field, and took the infant, because he was obviously an infant, but I had no room for the girl. So girls were not really wanted back then. So she went to go live with an uncle instead, who did not care about my mom one bit. And his wife could care even more. So she pretty much was the Cinderella story in that family. They pulled her from school because they couldn't afford it, and they let her cousins go to school instead. And she was there to maintain the house and do the chores and do the cooking. And anytime she misbehaved or spoke back, she was beaten with, she told me once, with a fire poker a couple times. And she did eventually run away and go on her own. She said to me, when she met my father, everything changed. She said, and I quote, "I say to myself, when I leave with your father, I not ever come back here to that country again. Your father, he saved me, and he saved both of us." So I get asked frequently, "Oh my gosh, how did your father and mother meet?" And it's a true story, they met on a street corner, not that kind of street. But yeah, street corner, where he worked a post and my mother would frequent the market every day. And he told us, "Oh gosh, when I saw your mother, she was the prettiest little thing." And my mom would be like, every time. And he said, I kept trying to get her attention. I'd kind of give her a wink, you know, like, yeah, the soldiers think they're so cool, right? Trying to flirt with the Vietnamese women. And my mom said one day, you know, "Oh, I kind of like his eyes." So she was carrying some bananas on her head, walked over and offered him one. And that's how it started. They started talking. Soon they were having picnics. They were going for walks, and they were going to movies, most of which were in French with Vietnamese subtitles. But it didn't matter because they spoke the international language. The courtship lasted a few weeks, and then my mom found herself pregnant. Her best friend told her, "Oh, Lee, you have to tell Danny." And she's like, "I don't know." She was scared. During that time, I don't know, I'm not going to tell you. "If you don't tell him, I will." My mom said, "Go ahead." So she did. And my father wanted to hear from my mother. He didn't know what to believe. Are you really pregnant? And he confronted her, and she was. And he said, well, I guess we better get to know each other a little bit. And that's exactly what they did. So the next few weeks, they spent a lot of time together, and they actually fell in love. It just kind of did a little backwards. So when my father's tour was up, he was forced to leave Vietnam, and he had to return to the States. Now he has a woman that he loves and a child on the way, and he did tell us that changed everything. There's no way I was going to leave a child behind. And as you know, during that war, the Vietnam War, lots and lots, hundreds of thousands of children like myself, who are known as Amerasians, were left behind. Some of them abandoned by their own mother because of the brutal attacks that they had from the locals there who did not want the American soldiers in that country. So I always am very thankful that my father was who he was, that he fought for us, and I wouldn't be here today if he hadn't come back. Hence, returning back to the recruitment office in the beginning, the only way he could find to get back to Vietnam to get us was to re-enlist, which I'm very thankful for. So this is my last story about Vietnam. My dad did come back. He found us, and he then needed to get us out of that country. He did all the paperwork necessary to marry her. No fancy wedding, no dress. My mom reminds us all the time, no ring, even to this day. She never had a wedding ring. But it doesn't matter. They were still together, and he had to find a way to get us out of that country. There was two problems, though. One, he could not go with her. He had to stay. There's nothing he could do. He had to stay and find a way to get us on a plane. Problem number two, she was now 7 months pregnant with my brother. A little bit of a problem. Go back to the language of love. So, he had to find a way. He got pretty creative, and he found a Vietnamese doctor who spoke pretty good English. And he said, you need to do me a favor. You need to write a note saying that they need to allow her to fly. And the doctor refused and said, I can't do that. It's too risky. And he said, well, what can you do? Can you write anything? And he said, I can write that she is in her third trimester. He said, fine, write it down. So we still have this note today of the doctor who wrote that she is in her third trimester. And that was it. So he took the paperwork, and they're at the gate. And I love when my father would tell the story. So I walk up there, got your mother just got a little suitcase. And I go right up there and I hand the papers to the guy. And he looks at the papers and he looks at me, and I went like this. And the guy looked at me, looked at my mom, looked at her belly, looked at you. As the plane went into the sky, and he said, I watched that sucker until it was, just a tiny little speck. And I said, okay. Then I scoured the airport just to make sure they didn't dump you in some room somewhere and pick it off. So I went through the whole entire airport. You were nowhere to be found. And in the background, the song, Leaving on a Jet Plane, was playing. He said, a little ironic, a little backwards, but he said that song just meant a lot to him to know that we were on our way to safety. Now I just have to survive the war. So that is that story. This is a really quick little story too. On the other end, he had written to my grandmother, his mom, and warned her with all the information about how we were coming, and tried to give a description of what we're going to look like. And my grandmother still laughs to this day. She would say, Daddy, I'm pretty sure we'll know which one to take. When he did finally survive the war, and then he got to come home, he was greeted at the airport by his 3 older brothers who also served in the military. And they were all there to greet the youngest baby brother who was done and who survived. They all survived. And my father walked out and he said, hey, don't let these fatigues fool you. I am a civilian. And that was it. And he came home to find us and finally meet his oldest son, Michael, who was already born. He hadn't met him yet, so it was great. Okay, who's ready for some crazy? So there are way too many stories of why I call my mother crazy. It's the good, bad, and the ugly. And these are things that I could say in front of her. It's all okay. She was a little difficult growing up. She was stubborn and probably a little disappointed of how poor we were. Because Americans, that's rich. That's what they were all told. Americans, oh, they're so rich. But no, we were pretty poor. We didn't have a whole lot. I remember sitting in front of the oven trying to stay warm. And she would make us bowls of white rice every day. Every day, white rice. And we'd have peanut butter and jelly mixed up with it. I can't even look at that. It's so disgusting. Never, ever. She used to hand sew all her clothes. She had a big green rumbling sewing machine. And just the sound of it and the click with it and the clipping of the scissors just brings me back. Because that was always the sound in the background. And I remember the day I had to finally wear like real clothes. All right. So I think I was like 10 or 11, and we actually could afford to go to Kmart. I got to buy 2 pairs of pants, 2 shirts, and 1 pair of shoes. And I was beside myself. I can still picture that outfit. I can still smell it. I remember smelling it. Oh my gosh, these smell so good. That's kind of why I love to go shopping. Do you smell that? These smell so good. Oh, it was great. So my mother, she took care of us. She cooked for us, she cleaned for us, and she would say crazy things all the time. And some quotes I've remembered throughout the years and I really enjoyed. One of them, she was really into Michael Jackson, right? During our time, everyone, right? You know, Michael Jackson, he was really cool. So she loved that song, Beat It. We had friends come over to the house and she'd say, hey, you eat my food. You eat it or you beat it. And she still uses it. Hey, eat it or beat it. So I don't know why, that one just cracks me up. I have a lot of friends who actually witnessed her saying that. Being a teenager with my mom was tough. Anything that I wore was always, no, don't you make your butt look big. Okay? And she would try to give me advice once in a while. You don't ever let him drive your car. And you keep your car clean. You hear me? You mean so. And if you do drive your car, you drive slow. So, what are you talking about? So she would say, oh, this is my other favorite one. You don't be a cow. No, you don't be a cow, give him all your milk. No. The car was a reference of my body was the car. I figured that out a lot later. Oh. Yeah. My brothers had a party once in our basement. We had a pool table growing up. And she did not like teenagers, I'm just going to say. I think she thought we were spoiled brats, which we probably were. We were definitely brats. We definitely didn't have what she had growing up. And she came down once and so she's this tall, first of all. And she always had chopsticks in her hands. I don't know why. And she would walk kind of like this. And she came down the stairs and she goes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Damn it, I call the cops. And I was like, okay, so she really called the cops. So the mere fact that teenage life with my mom was really hard. And I think there was a little jealousy going on because I was the only daughter. I was definitely a daddy's girl. We were really close. And she couldn't relate to me. And I couldn't relate to her. It was really difficult. Where my father, on the other hand, was excellent with teenagers. I think he really came into his prime when, oh my gosh, they're old enough, we can do things, we can talk. And he and I would stay up late at night talking about all kinds of things. I remember talking about whether aliens were real. We talked about heaven a lot, talked about life after death. And he used to tell me, I'm telling you right now, when I die, I'm going to come back, I'm going to prove to you that there is life after death, that there is, I will live on it, and I will preach inside you, you just wait. I'd be like, okay, we talk about it. My mom would come out, what are you doing? You have to go to school and go to bed. And so, like, okay, just things, we just talked, he was open to it, and I could trust him with anything. I could call him if I was at a party and I'd been drinking too much. I could call him and my father would come. Okay, Daughtry, I'm on my way. No questions asked, he would pick us up, drive me home. So I had an amazing father that was there for us. And I can't tell you how thankful I was for that. He was great with all the kids, all the neighbor kids loved him. There was a lot of boys in our neighborhood that relied on him that could have gone down the wrong path. And he would take them in and play basketball with them and talk to them. He had a way with them, and they were just all drawn to him, kind of as a leader. And he would have done anything for any one of those kids, and any one of my friends, in fact. So, which leads me to the teenagers. Let's talk about teenagers. I really don't want to spend too much time talking about this part. One, it's difficult, and when I signed up for this, I'm like, yeah, no problem, I would love to tell the story. You don't ever realize how often you're up in front of 150 people talking about something very difficult. I practiced a lot, I cried a lot in front of the mirror by myself, thank God. Tried to get it out of my system, but just bear with me when I tell you the story. It was Mother's Day weekend, Saturday, May 11th, 1996, and my father went fishing up at the Pilchuck River in Granite Falls. I'm sure you guys know that area. We used to go there all the time as kids. We'd have picnics, and we'd camp up there. It was kind of a special place for all of us. Well, my father was on his way home, and a 15-year-old girl waved him down like she was in trouble and needed a ride. She got into his truck. Of course, he would pull over because, again, he always took care of kids and teenagers, and who wouldn't for a young girl? What is she doing at Carelli by herself? Well, she got into the truck, and she shot him immediately two times, through his belly here. And then she proceeded to stab him across his jugular vein 3 times, and he had 10 other stab wounds all over his body. All of this to steal his truck. She was there with a 19-year-old boy and a 16-year-old boy as well. And they came out, and the idea was, okay, let's kill the driver and take the truck. Apparently they were there hiding from the police because they had just committed some other crime the week before where she had stabbed someone else. 15-year-old girl. Can't imagine. No drugs. There was a pair of witnesses that showed up. A car drove up and saw them in the middle of the road, of the gravel road. And a woman, her name was Gina Christensen, approached them and said, hey, do you kids need some help? And she did say in her report, and I did speak with her personally, that everything looked strange. It was a weird sight. The truck was in the middle of the road with the doors wide open. There was 2 kids standing there, and she was actually sitting on top of my father's body and kind of trying to conceal it. And she said, well, what's going on here? What's wrong with him? And why are you sitting on him? Is he okay? And she said, oh yeah, he's just sick. He's sick, he's okay. And she said, well, he can't breathe if you're sitting like that. And she walked towards them to try and help. And she said that's when she heard a voice, really deep, right here, a deep voice that said, I'm gone, you need to get out. She said it was so profound, it startled her. She didn't know if there was someone else speaking to her, and she immediately got the feeling she needed to get out. That's when she saw the gun on the seat and knew, okay, I gotta get out of here. So she just said, okay, well, as long as you're okay, if you need help, just let us know. She hurried up, got in the car, and they drove out. And they drove straight to the police station and told them what they saw. The teenagers actually were caught within an hour of that. They disposed of my father's body over the ravine, and they pushed the truck over the ravine as well to conceal it because it was no good to them. And the 19-year-old, who was the mastermind in all of this, told her, you need to go make sure he's dead. So she went back down the ravine and stabbed my father 3 more times in the back of the neck, just to make sure. He'd already been caught by then. So now what do? The 3 teenagers hung out there until a man in a red truck drove by. Same kind of situation, but they didn't kill him. They didn't stop him. They asked for a ride, they got in the back of his truck, and he took him into town. And by the time they got into town, that's when the cops found them, pulled them over, and the rest is history. That girl, in her reports, bragged about what she did to my father. She called herself the angel of death. Can you believe that in her letters? And in her letter, she stated, well, the mother F wouldn't die. So I know that my father did another time fight for his life there. Unfortunately, when my father, the reason why he was even up at that river was because they had had an argument that day. It was Mother's Day weekend, and they were trying to decide what to do. My mom wanted to go to the nurseries. He said, let's go fishing. And so they had an argument, like we all do every day with our husbands, with anyone. But he said, that's it, I'm going to go fishing. And she said, fine, then come back. So, something that she has to live with and tell her all the time, it's okay, Mom. It's okay. He knows, he understands. So I always say as a little message, say, I love you. I don't care if you're in a fight. When you're going to say goodbye to someone, don't say that. Don't say that. It's something that she has to live with, but I know at times that she will be able to forgive herself. And it's okay, we forgive her. It's okay. 3 days after my father's death, I was home in my old bedroom. It's really hard, of course. There's a lot going on. It was on the news a lot. It was hard to watch television. We didn't talk a lot. A lot of silence. My brothers and I was living in California. I flew home. And I had a brother in Alaska, Steve. This part here, I cannot stress to you how important that you understand and believe what I'm about to tell you. But 3 days after his death, I wake up in the morning to the movement or a feel of someone near my bed. Someone was kneeling beside me. And I open my eyes and I see a glimpse of this man kneeling before me. And it scared me. I went, oh! And it probably lasted 3 seconds. 1001, 1002, 1003. People say 3 seconds is short. That's a long time. I looked at this man, and this man looked at me. He had the most beautiful, I don't know if they were blue or green or in between, the most beautiful eyes. And his eyes spoke to me, not with words, but I knew everything he was trying to tell me. He was trying to tell me, I love you. You are loved. It's going to be okay. And I'm so sorry for your pain. All of that in 3 seconds. I'll never forget it as long as I live. It stayed with me, and I got up and I told my family, I said, you're not going to believe this. I don't know who it was. An angel came to me. I woke up and he was kneeling next to me. And I said, I don't think it was Jesus because his hair was shorter and his beard wasn't long. He looked like a disciple. Maybe it was Joseph. I was trying to figure out pretty sure it wasn't Jesus. So for years and years, I always remember, okay, the way he looked at me, I'm going to take that with me. That was pure love that I felt. And everything was okay. It was going to be okay. Well, fast forward, 40th birthday, my husband wins a trip through work, and we're in Hawaii, and I'm right in the middle of reading that wonderful book, Heaven is for Real. Has anyone read it? Okay, so some of you know. So the book, briefly, is about a little boy, Colton, who at 4 years old was having surgery, and he apparently had made a trip to heaven during that time, and he explained what happened to him. He could tell his parents how he was floating over his body, and he could see his mom and dad over here, and he could do this, and Jesus came and took him and brought him to heaven, and he got to meet him. And his father wrote this book about it because it was miraculous. This kid knew things that he shouldn't have known, that justified things. And he said he had to write and share it because there's no way that Colton could have known these things. So the joke, not a joke, but Colton, they always said, well, what did Jesus look like? And they find a picture. Is this what he looked like? And he always said, no, his hair's too long. Or, no, because his eyes aren't right. It was always, it became a joke like, what's wrong with this one? Then the teeth, the nose, it was something wrong. So one day, the father gets a phone call because apparently on the Good Morning America show, there was a girl. Her name was Akane, I'm going to say it wrong, Akiane Krimirik. She was a 9-year-old girl. Do you guys know about her? She painted a vision that she saw of Jesus. She said Jesus came to her in a vision, and she decided to paint it. So Colton's father thought, this is interesting. He scoured everywhere, went to go find that picture. And he got Colton, and he said, okay, what's wrong with this one? And Colton took a look at it and said, oh yeah, that's him. That's him. I'm reading this book, again, in Hawaii. John's passed out because we were at a party. I can't put this book down. And I'm reading it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to see this picture. I have to see this picture. So I flip through, and I see at the end of the book, there it is. That was the man that was kneeling beside my bed. And I bawled as soon as I saw the picture, and I had to make it, you have to look at this. This really. So it was. I had it in my head that he looked a certain way, like we kind of all do. I'll tell you though, the connection of seeing that photo and knowing that that was the man kneeling before me was profound. That's my story here. So a couple things happened. As the years go by, you heal. First couple of weeks are always hard when you lose someone. You go to the grocery store because now people have moved on. They've sent their cards and their flowers. And you still feel like you have a big sign on your forehead that says, Dad murdered. And people are like, hey, how are you? Good to see you. I'm good. Don't you realize that I'm in pain? Can't you see it? Time really does heal, even the most profound events as a murder, when it's out of your control. I do want to tell you though, no one's tragedy is worse than another. My story I'm not sharing my story because I think it's better or more tragic or more important. I just want to share because all of you have a story. We all have a loss of some kind, or if you haven't, you will. It's inevitable. How you deal with that loss is up to you, but you can heal. It really will be okay, and you are loved. My father, remember, in our conversation said, oh, I'm going to play tricks on you. Oh my God, Dad, enough. So, I've had babies, 3 girls, and little toys. And I don't know if this has happened to you guys, would go off in the middle of the night. I had one toy, it was a little Elmo, and he would say, let's play! I even pulled the batteries out of that sucker, and it would still go off. And I'd walk by the playroom, and he would, let's play! And in the middle of the night, a little banjo, my dad played the guitar, would go off on one of the other toys, and I'm like, John, I think my dad's playing tricks on us. We used to have this bouncy seat that all 3 of my girls used, and it played John Lennon, Imagine. I think everyone knows that song. That ain't Imagine, it was playing Winnie the Pooh. Do, 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 and I'm like, where does that come from? I went up to that bouncy seat, and I'm listening, thinking, what? Now, Winnie the Pooh was one of my favorites growing up. And John and I were like, whoa, that's weird. Maybe we should throw that out. But here's something that will really blow your mind. So there was a million more of those stories of little things that I know was my dad. I'd say, okay, I got it. Thank you. You're funny, hilarious. One Christmas, my youngest brother, Steve, contacted me and said, hey, did I tell you what happened? I said, no, what's going on? He said, so I have, he runs an electric company, his employees were trying to send in their time cards. And he said, they keep trying to fax in their time cards to my fax machine, but it keeps going to someone else's house. This name keeps popping up, and they're calling me, they don't know what's going on. So I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course it works. So he decides to call his own fax machine to find out, what's going on. And the person who answers the phone on the other end, her name is Gina Christensen. She was the witness there on that mountain that day. All of a sudden, my brother's fax machine, of all things, really, is now connected to her. So we said, okay, there is some divine intervention there. We were meant to see her, which we did. My mother was in the process of selling our home, my home growing up, and Gina met us there, and she said, your father, I think, is trying to contact me. She was kind of freaking me out because every time the phone thing would come up, the idea would say Barnell. I'm like, oh my gosh! It was really difficult for her, that whole happening. It affected her story changed her life and what she saw. So that was another little miracle. Unexplainable. The phone actually ended up going back to normal after some point. The phone company had no idea what happened. So there's that. All right. Thanks for listening to my story. I am not here to tell you that you need to believe in Jesus Christ. That's not what this is about. I am going to tell you that we need to believe that there are angels around us at all times, and I am going to tell you that you will be open to seeing them if you open your mind and your heart. I know those signs are out there, and you can see them. Be open. Pay attention. So whatever your take is here today with hearing my story, whether it is to fight for what you believe in, whether it is to learn how to forgive something or someone, maybe it's yourself, or maybe it's just opening your eyes to the possibility that we are not alone and we are loved, and everything's going to be okay. Whatever it is, I want you to start with a place of love and light. Because after all, this is your life we're talking about. Thank you. It's not very long, but I wanted to share this for you so you can see the faces of who I am talking about, the soldier and his crazy Asian lady.